Why is my own front door empty? The late November wind rattles the screen, and I can almost taste cinnamon and burnt wood smoke from my neighbor's fireplace as I grip the phone. George. Mom's voice trembles, trailing off in a way it never did when I was a kid. My grip tightens around the leather wallet I'd stitched myself, its edges soft from weeks of folding and wrapping. I'd planned to arrive at noon, help Dad carve the turkey, and present Mom with her first Southern cooking book. She'd been excited about the cornbread chapter. But when I called to confirm the time, she sighed so deeply it felt like the floor dropped beneath me. "Blake wants this dinner formal," she said, voice low, "and he asked me not to invite you." My heart hammers. Sweat beads at my hairline in the crisp, 40-degree air. "Blake?" I echo, breathing in the faint scent of pine from the wreath on my door. My younger brother, Blake, he straps Rolexes on his wrist and hustles million-dollar real estate deals in Dallas, has decided I'm not family. I imagine him now in his polished kitchen, leather soles on marble floor, telling Mom that my flannel shirts and calloused hands would embarrass his fiancée, Madison, when she meets the family. "It's nothing personal," Mom says in that rehearsed way people use to cushion a blow, but I feel the knife slide in my chest anyway, twisting. I stand alone on my porch, wine stinging my cheeks, staring at my old Ford that's never failed me. When I let the phone go dead, the line snaps back in the receiver, as if to mock me. I step inside and place the wallet on the coffee table. Its weight seems too heavy now. The smell of fresh sawdust from my workshop drifts in through the open window, a reminder that I'd spent all week building Mom a raised garden bed for her pecan saplings. They wouldn't know I buried secrets under those boards. Land deeds, investment statements, proof that Blake built his fortune on land he'd schemed away from a friend. I press my palm to the worn oak table and taste copper on my tongue. My own fear or anger, I'm not sure. I remember the first time Blake called me Plan B 5 years ago, back when Plan A was going to college, which I skipped to learn a trade he disdained. My parents clucked worriedly, but I learned to weld, to solder, to install furnaces in the dead of winter so families could stay warm. I loved the work, the hiss of steam, the tang of metal, the satisfaction of a system humming to life. Yet here I stand, uninvited, as if all that mattered was a suit and a silver cufflink. I close my eyes and listen. The wind chimes in the yard, the soft rumble of traffic on Riverside Drive, the lonely echo of my own heartbeat. Something shifts inside me, an ember of purpose. I pick up the wallet, run my thumb over the hand-stitched seams, and realize the gift no longer fits. They taught me that losers have no place at the table. Fine, I'll find a new banquet. I step back outside, letting the cold breeze brush past like a warning. The sun hangs low, gold and heavy, but I feel a strange warmth pulsing behind my ribs. Today, I am the uninvited guest. Today, I am the storm gathering on the horizon. And very soon, they will wish they'd never asked me to stay away. They laughed at Blake's golden cufflinks as he raised his glass of Napa Valley Red, boasting about his Dallas Miracle clients, while Madison, his fiancée, with makeup as sharp as her heels, smiled too wide. In that moment, I was across town in my dusty workshop, the smell of motor oil and hot metal clinging to my overalls, listening to their clinking laughter through the cracked radio left on for background noise. I never imagined my boring life as an HVAC guy would ever matter to them. But behind my workbench, under a single bare bulb, I ran my fingers over a folder stamped confidential, packed with blueprints, shell company paperwork, escrow statements, and digital signatures. I remembered how, 5 years ago, Blake had cut off Travis, his college buddy, in that Southlake land deal. Travis thought he owned half the development, but Blake used a hidden LLC, backdated permits, and forged titles to squeeze him out. I saw it all when I installed the climate system in those townhomes. Files left open on the desk, emails between Blake and his lawyer boasting about creative structuring. And I kept copies. I kept every file, printed and digital, saving them like relics, because Blake's high life was built on other people's dreams. That weekend, he sat at the family table, Mom beaming, Dad nodding approval, Blake leaning back like he owned the world, while I was setting my own stage. I'd quietly bought the last parcel of land his Blakeview Estates desperately needed, using an anonymous shell. 40 acres 5 miles from the site, bought with cash wired from my secret account. It cost me a little, But it was worth it to watch him stall when his investors realized they couldn't complete the zoning. He must have thought he was untouchable, that I'd always be the underdog in grease-stained boots. I left the workshop at dawn on Monday, the air cool on my skin, and parked outside the bulletproof glass of his investor group's office. A black SUV pulled in ahead of me, his chief financial officer, I guessed, and the guard buzzed them through. I tucked the folder under my arm, heart pounding like a jackhammer, and slipped inside too. No one recognized me. I looked like another tradesman there to fix the AC. But I sent that folder off to the board's email list before their first meeting, complete with side-by-side comparisons of real titles and Blake's forged copies. Then I slipped back out, the scent of fresh coffee wafting from the lobby, and walked to an ATM where I withdrew enough cash to cover my investment and still have a safety net. I pocketed the receipts, another small trophy. By noon, I watched on my phone as the news alert popped up. Blake Daniels' real estate empire under investigation. He probably checked his email and saw the flood of audit notices, then felt the cold sweat of panic when his phones rang off the hook. That's when I texted Mom. "Happy Thanksgiving. Thought you'd like to know Blake's empire is on fire." I imagined her reading it as she smoothed her Sunday dress. My words stung her. I knew it because when Dad tried to call me back, I let it go straight to voicemail. Then I forwarded another set of documents to Travis, proof of the forged deed, the wire transfers, even a voice memo of Blake bragging about outsmarting the dumb kid who called himself brother. Travis's reply was immediate. "Thank you." I felt a fierce swell in my chest. Not pride, exactly, but something close to justice. I'd spent nights hunched over that workbench, listening to the click of keys and the hum of my soldering iron, feeling small and angry. They called me loser. They pretended I didn't exist. Now, I was the whisper in boardrooms and the headline on every local site. Even Madison uninvited herself when her friends at the country club forwarded the news. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I stood outside the office again, the wind carrying the distant hum of traffic, felt the grit under my boots, and let the moment sink in. No one saw me, but I was everywhere in their downfall. The sun fell low, painting the glass towers red, and I tipped my head back, tasting the sweet burn of cold air. They thought they erased me. They didn't know I'd been writing my own invitation to their reckoning all along. By dawn on Friday, the sky over Dallas was still dark and smooth like spilled ink. But I was wide awake, my old Ford rumbling north toward the glass-fronted tower where Blake's investors met each week. I parked under a flickering street lamp that hummed with electricity, the faint smell of exhaust and hot asphalt melding with the crisp promise of a new day. My fingers wrapped around the manila folder, pressing against my chest. Inside were all the documents I'd gathered over years of late-night work in dusty apartments and shiny showrooms. Escrow statements showing funds diverted to shell companies, backdated permit applications bearing Blake's forged signature, even audio recordings of his lawyer boasting about how easily we could cut Travis out of their joint deal. I stepped inside as a maintenance worker, uniform grease still under my nails, heart hammering like a piston. The lobby smelled of fresh coffee and floor polish, the low buzz of fluorescent lights pressed against my ears like a warning. I flashed a trade badge ID I'd made, walked past the security desk, and slipped the folder into the second-floor mail slot marked Investor Board. The click of the slot's latch sounded like a gunshot in my head. I left before anyone noticed, the hiss of the revolving door sealing my actions behind me. On my way home, I stopped at a cafe in Uptown, the windows steamed with warmth, and ordered a black coffee sharp enough to cut through steel. I sat at a corner table, pulled out my phone, and refreshed my inbox. By the time I'd taken 3 sips, an email had arrived. Notice of formal audit, Daniels Development Group. A single line from the board secretary read, "Your inquiry has initiated an immediate freeze on all assets." My chest tightened. The cold coffee burned my throat in the best way, a reminder that I was alive and unstoppable. I tapped out a text to Mom, pretending to be casual. "Happy weekend. Hope the turkey turned out well. Pow, heard Blake's offices are freezing assets. Wild times." I hit send before second-guessing myself. I should have lied, backpedaled, but no. They didn't want me at their table, so I wouldn't spare them pity. Then I sent the same documents to Travis with a note. It's time. I knew that within hours, Travis's attorney cousin would file motions to seize control of the developments Blake stole from him. The damage was irreversible. Back in Fort Worth, the autumn wind rattled my porch swing as I pulled into my driveway. The scent of fallen leaves and distant barbecue drifted in through the open window. I climbed out, still in my uniform, and found Blake's first call waiting on my phone. No voicemail, just a missed call icon blinking angrily. He probably wanted answers or threats or apologies. I didn't call back. Instead, I pocketed my phone, walked past the hand-stitched wallet I'd left on the table, and grabbed my toolbox. Inside were the wrenches and screwdrivers I used daily. Today I'd work on my own projects, not his entangling lies. All day, I installed a new water heater for Mrs. Delgado 2 blocks over. The hiss of steam and the smell of solder soothed me more than any bottle of whiskey could. Every twist of the pipe reminded me I fixed things for a living, things that mattered. News alerts pinged on my phone. Daniels Development Board suspends Blake Daniels. Dallas investors call for emergency meeting. My lips curved into a small smile. I had tasted fear before, in tight crawl spaces behind dusty furnaces, and crushed it. This was different. I delivered proof of Blake's crimes, watched his empire implode, all from the seat of my pickup. When night fell and the sky turned bruised purple, I parked under the oak tree in my yard, the bark rough against my palm as I climbed the fence to my neighbor's porch roof to change a loose shingle. The wood was damp from evening dew. The air smelled like pine and fresh rain. I worked slowly, deliberately, thinking how easily I'd slipped those folders into board members' mail slots, how I'd hidden my own windfall, 40 acres near his development, under an alias nobody traced until it was too late. I'd outbuilt Blake at his own game without stealing a dime from him directly. I didn't need to break in. I just needed patience and truth. As I fastened the shingle into place, the neighborhood streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows between houses. I slid down the ladder, wiped sweat from my brow, and felt an ember glow behind my ribs. They had called me a loser, a nobody in overalls, unworthy of a seat at the table. They had underestimated the man who measured pipes and laid ducks for a living. Now their world of polished marble and tinted windows trembled on the edge of collapse, because the brother they ignored had become the architect of their downfall. I climbed back into my truck, the engine's rumble a comforting purr, and drove down quiet streets lined with golden leaves. Somewhere, Blake was scrambling to salvage what remained. Somewhere, Mom and Dad were waking to the knowledge that their own child orchestrated a reckoning. I didn't hate them, just the lies they embraced, the pride that blinded them to everything real. I headed toward home, ready for the next day of honest work, of building rather than tearing down, but with the satisfaction that justice, like water, always finds its way. And sometimes you have to open a valve. The Monday morning sun seared through the blinds of my workshop, turning dust motes into slow dancing ghosts as I heard the pings on my phone, messages I'd been waiting for. First, the news alert. Dallas Business Journal, Daniels Development Group under formal federal investigation, followed seconds later by another. Investors freeze all Blake Daniels assets. I felt nothing but a quiet click of satisfaction in my chest, like the final bolt on a system I'd installed flawlessly. Behind me, the hiss of my soldering iron on copper pipe reminded me of the lives I'd fixed, day after day, only to have my own brother mock me as a loser. Today, that quitter in a suit was the one with everything crumbling. My phone buzzed again. Mom calling. I glanced at the caller ID. Mom, home. I didn't pick up. Instead, I thumbed through the stack of printouts on my bench. Forged title deeds, backdated permits, Shell LLC documents, and the email threads I'd forwarded to Blake's board just before Thanksgiving. Each paper represented a small piece of the empire I'd unraveled in secret. I put my hand on a cold wrench, the metal smooth under my palm, and breathed in the familiar scent of motor oil and pine sawdust. At 9:15 a.m., an email from Travis arrived. Meeting 2 p.m., law office. I tapped a thumbs-up emoji, then grabbed my keys and climbed into my Ford. The engine roared to life, echoing the anger that had fueled me these past weeks. But now, it was tempered by calm resolve. I rolled through Fort Worth streets lined with red brick bungalows, the scent of pecan pie drifting from Mrs. Delgado's open window, and wondered if Mom was watching the same alerts on her phone, guilt knotting her heart as she read how her golden boy, my brother, had been exposed. By noon, I was at the law office in a nondescript strip mall. The walls painted a soothing teal, but smelling faintly of stale coffee. Travis greeted me with a firm handshake and a look of relief in his eyes. His lawyer cousin sat behind a desk piled high with files, already drafting motions to reclaim the Southlake land Blake had stolen. When they told me their plan, civil suits, injunctions, criminal referrals, I felt a surge of vindication. This was the justice I'd longed for. They offered me a small equity stake in the reclaimed development, a gesture of partnership born from gratitude, and I accepted with a sober nod, knowing I'd trade plaques and profit for one more chance to do right by someone who deserved it. I left with a signed agreement in my jacket pocket and the sun high overhead, burning into my skin as if to remind me that my path was no longer in my brother's shadow. On my drive home, I passed Blake's old neighborhood, silent streets of gated homes where his BMW used to sit gleaming in the drive. Now the driveways were empty, lawns unkempt, and I felt a strange tug of sympathy for the family that had forsaken me when I needed them. But I also felt freedom, as vivid as the fresh air streaming through my open window. Back at my house, I found 3 missed texts from Dad. "George, we need to talk. Son, please come by." I stared at them, thumb hovering over the screen. I remembered the first time Dad taught me to solder a joint, his hands guiding mine, and how proud he was when I repaired the heater in the old family home. That man would have stood by me, I thought, if he weren't blinded by Blake's silver cufflinks. But I realized that reconciliation meant more than a quick visit. It meant confronting the past, facing the lies they told, and demanding more than apologies. I replied simply, "I'm busy building a future. We can talk when you've done the same." My heart didn't pound or ache, it simply registered the words and moved on. Then I called Mrs. Delgado to confirm her heater was purring smoothly, her gratitude warm over the line, the sound of someone's life being made better, rather than destroyed. In the afternoon light, I climbed into my workshop attic to retrieve a spare part for my van, the attic's narrow stairs creaking beneath me. The air was musty with old lumber and forgotten Christmas decorations, and I coughed as I brushed past a box of holiday lights. I realized how different my world was, one built on craftsmanship and care, not on empty promises and forged paperwork. As dusk approached, I heard my phone buzz again. This time, it was a headline forwarded by Travis. "Mom and Dad Daniels request family meeting. After all, they need George's help." I didn't smile. My fingers hovered over the screen before I locked the phone and set it face down on a shelf, where a line of pump jacks and miniature furnaces stood as trophies of my honest labor. I didn't need to respond to promises made out of convenience. Instead, I lit the lamp over my workbench. The bulb's warm glow, a small beacon against the gathering shadows, picked up my soldering iron and focused on the next project, a custom vent hood for a new client who'd asked me to design it from scratch. The hiss of molten metal filled the room, and as I worked, I felt the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd turned the tables on a golden boy's empire by simply being himself, steady, true, and unafraid to reveal the truth. They'd cast me out once, but now I was in, on my own terms, and I was ready to build a life where my name alone opened doors. No cufflinks required. When the first frost dusted the rooftops of Fort Worth, I stood behind the counter of our new joint office, Daniels & Co. HVAC and Property Solutions, wrapped in the warm scent of fresh cedar and coffee brewing in the back room. A year had passed since I rang in the storm that toppled Blake's empire, and now the hum of business phones felt like music. I ran a hand over the smooth oak counter, remembering the day I sat alone on my porch, clutching that hand-stitched wallet, tasting copper in my mouth, and vowing I'd build something real. Today, I had partners who trusted me. Travis, whose eyes still held that mix of relief and respect, and his lawyer cousin, whose introductions had opened doors I never dreamed of knocking on. Our small team of 4, me in grease-stained coveralls folded neatly in a corner of my closet, Travis in crisp dress shirts, and 2 apprentices I'd hired from vocational school, were about to present our first joint bid for the city's affordable housing retrofit project. It was honest work, one proud turn of the wrench at a time. As I prepared the presentation folder, the soft vibration of my phone startled me. A headline: Daniels & Co. wins major city contract. Local tradesman rises above family scandal. I stared at it, tasting the sweetness of vindication on my tongue, but I didn't feel the need to gloat. Instead, I exhaled and let the paper flutter to the laminate floor, where it settled between grease stains and scattered blueprints. The workshop smelled of heated metal and pine sawdust. Home. A voice called out behind me. "George, they're ready for you in conference room B." I nodded, smoothed my shirt, no more flannel today, and walked down the hall, passing photos of projects. New ductwork in an elementary school, radiant heated floors in a veteran's home. Each frame held a story of lives warmed, lights that stayed on, families safe in their homes. In the conference room, Travis and the city panelists sat waiting. Their faces were kind, expectant. I took a deep breath, the faint clang of pipes and distant hum of computers echoing in my chest, and launched into the pitch with clear, steady words about energy savings, community care, and honest pricing. Every now and then, I caught the panel's eyes glinting with approval. Afterward, as they shook my hand and congratulated us, I felt a calm pride settle in like a well-fitted glove. Back at my desk, I found a handwritten note slipped under my door. Mom's handwriting, shaky but familiar. I unfolded it, the paper crackling like autumn leaves underfoot. "George, you've made us proud in a way we never knew how before. Please come home for dinner. Our house is warm again." I pressed the note to my heart and closed my eyes, the scent of pine from my workshop mingling with the faint trace of her lavender perfume, a bittersweet reminder of all we'd lost and the truth that couldn't be unspoken. I folded the note and tucked it into my wallet, a new one, bought with my first honest profits, next to a photo of Tracy and me beneath the Allegheny River Bridge, both of us laughing as sunlight danced on the water. A soft pang of regret flickered through me, that those empty chairs I reserved at my wedding would someday fill with faces warmed by forgiveness, but I let it pass like a late leaf on the wind. My phone buzzed again. A text from Travis. "Celebrate tonight? First round's on me." I smiled, tapped back. "See you at 7. And stood, stretching my shoulders as the office doors opened behind me to reveal a crisp twilight sky. I paused at the threshold, feeling the weight of what I'd achieved, not just in dollars or contracts, but in integrity, in proving that a man in overalls could matter more than a man in a suit. Somewhere, Blake was fighting to rebuild his life. Maybe he'd find his own real path someday, or maybe not. The ending of his story was still unwritten, and part of me wondered if he would ever learn what it means to work with heart instead of hidden fees. But that was his choice now, not mine. As I walked toward Travis's truck, its engine rumbling a warm promise of celebration, I let the last amber light of day wash over me, knowing that I'd broken the cycle of silence and shame. The air tasted of possibility, crisp like the first frost, and I realized this was just the start of a life worth building. One honest bolt at a time, one open door at a time, while the memory of that lonely Thanksgiving became a distant echo under the hum of new beginnings.